Hey there, you're listening to the Girls Talking Life podcast, and I'm your host, Johanna. If you're like me, you love time with friends. I always leave feeling encouraged, inspired to try something different, or I've learned something new. So why not continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends? We're not made to do life on our own. So in each episode of this show, I'll bring you a girl and her story to give you refreshing ideas to stir your soul. Let's walk this road together. Are you ready to talk life? Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here. If you're a regular podcast listener, then I'm sure you know that leaving a rating and review for a show on the platform where you listen helps other people find that show. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited when someone reviews Girls Talking Life. The other reason is the encouragement it gives me. Knowing that you're listening and liking what you hear fuels me to keep doing this work. Here's what one listener had to say about the show. Johanna has such a sincere heart, and this season about lasting relationships, the first episode, drops a golden nugget and invitation to do the work of relational labor. Love it. Thank you, Speedy3333. I am so grateful that you took a minute to share your thoughts. It means so much. If you haven't left a review yet, please consider it. If not for this show, then for another one that you love. I guarantee they will be so grateful. And speaking of that first episode, if you haven't had a chance to listen, go back and listen to episode 53, where it's just me, and I am kind of introing this series that we're in on community building and friendship and creating meaningful connections. Do you choose a word of the year? I've done it for a while now. And a few years ago, I added a Bible study component because I wanted to get more out of it. I wanted to make it more meaningful. So if that's you, if you feel like I have my word, now what? If you'd like to study what the Bible says about your word, I am sharing my Word of the Year word study with you. Your word or some form of it needs to be in the Bible for it to work, but that's it. If you get the Girls Talking Life newsletter, you've already gotten a copy of this in your inbox. And if you're not a subscriber, you can find the link in the show notes to sign up, and I will send you the word study too. What is holding you back from building community? Are you an inviter, or do you wait to be invited? How do you make time for friendships? I am joined today by not one, but two lovely ladies, Kristin Demery and Kendra Roll, who are part of a trio called the Ruth Experience. These ladies created a community, a modern-day tea and testimony, where women come together and share their joys and sorrows and how God is at work in their lives, much like the way Ruth and Naomi interacted in the Old Testament. Everything we talk about can be found in the show notes for today's episode on girlstalkinglife.com. Let's jump in. Here is my conversation with Kendra and Kristin. Hi there, ladies. Thanks so much for coming on Girls Talking Life. I am thrilled that I get to talk with you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're glad to be here.
I am speaking with two of you, which is a first on the show. It's always one-on-one conversation. So introduce yourselves and tell me why there are two of you.
Well, my name is Kendra, and I'm actually part of a trio of women who write for the Ruth Experience. We've been writing together for almost 9 years now. We write mainly women's devotionals, and our newest devotional that just came out in the fall of 2020 is the 1-year daily acts of friendship.
Yep. My name is Kristin, and like Kendra said, I am the second person in our trio, and Kendra and I are actually sisters, and then Julie, our third author, is sort of an extra sister for us. So we've been writing together for a long time and doing life with one another for a long time, and we love it.
Well, tell me a little bit about the Ruth Experience. What is that? And then how did it come to be?
Well, it started actually even earlier than we had been writing books together. Kristin, Julie, and I, and a group of women had been doing life in person together, and we had been meeting and kind of doing different Bible studies as a group. And we were wanting to incorporate that into the church setting that we were a part of at the time. But there were a lot of women coming in who didn't really have any kind of a faith background or context. And so I had grown up with the idea of tea and testimony nights, which I absolutely loved as a young girl, but we felt like that was kind of old-fashioned to call them those. And so we wanted to update the name of what those would be. And so as we were praying, we just thought, the story of Ruth and Naomi in the Bible is really a story of two women doing life together in community. And you just kind of the weaving of their lives together, but also how God worked things out through their joy and their sorrow and their pain, and how he met them in those places. And so we kind of, as we were praying about it, realized that's the experience that we wanted women to have when we gathered. And so we started calling those gatherings the Ruth Experience, where we would have women share testimonies of things that God had done in their lives. And so when we created this online space, a couple of years after that, we just thought, my goodness, this is the same kind of feel or experience we want to create in an online space as well, for women to come and to be encouraged and to hear stories of other women and what God has done in the good times and in the hard times. And so that's really kind of the idea and the story behind the Ruth Experience. And it just sort of stuck. We have considered over the years changing, our name, but we just haven't found anything, because people always need an explanation, which is fine. But we just haven't found anything else that we feel like really kind of fits and encompasses that idea. So,
yeah, well, with a short explanation, it makes perfect sense. You call yourself community builders. And when I was coming up with kind of the idea behind my podcast and writing out things that were going to be my vision for it, one of the things I wrote down was cultivate community. And I want people to listen to the conversations online, of course, but then I want to encourage people to gather in person and to meet face to face and have those friendships and have those conversations. But where do we start with community building? How do we get that going?
For me, when I think about this question, I think about not just where I could go to build community, but where I already am, that I can build community. So maybe that's the church I'm a part of, or the neighborhood that I live in, or, the organizations that my kids are a part of. So I think for me, community building really starts with the places where you already are going and the people that you're already seeing, especially when it comes to something like your neighbors. How many people think of community building as reaching out to your neighbor?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's easy to overlook the places that we already find ourselves in whatever stage of life we're in. It can vary depending on our life stage. So if we're single, it's going to look different than someone who's maybe newly married versus someone who's just having children. But I think Kristin's right. I think oftentimes we can miss opportunities because we want to look for a new space, and maybe there's something right in front of us that's already being created where we can at least start there. Not that we can't look for new spaces as well, but I think it changes too over time. And I think it kind of begs the point that we have to be the ones who are looking. We have to be the initiators who are going out and trying to find that community in those places. And sometimes that in and of itself is what kind of, I think, holds us back from finding community, is because it's hard to be the one to reach out first and not sit back and wait for other people to come to us.
That brings me to the next thing I wanted to ask you about. Day 1 of your devotional is entitled, Be the Inviter. Why do we shy away from that? And how do we get over our hesitation?
Yeah. I think there's so many different reasons why we could shy away from that. I know for me personally, it's my own insecurities of maybe thinking someone's not going to like me, or they might reject me. They may not want to come and be my friend. These kinds of thoughts that kind of swirl in our head that I think sort of hold us back. But what I've found as I've gotten older and just kind of invited people even through that fear is that I have found so many more people are actually really looking for community and are so honored when we do invite them in. And I think that surprises us, but it shouldn't, because I think we all live in places where people are lonely and looking for connection and trying to find friends. And when we can overcome our own fear and invite other people in, I find it most often that invitation is accepted. People are so, honored to be included. But that's me. Kristin, what do you think?
One of the things that has helped me to push back some of those fears is because I'm totally an introvert. I like to be home. I'm kind of happy where I am. But one thing that has really helped me is if I'm trying to do something like cultivate community in my church, and I maybe want to invite a group of ladies over or something like that. What's been really helpful for me is to ask a friend to come alongside and be there with me. So I at least have one person who's kind of a friendly face who can help me do it too. So I think, yes, we want to be the inviter, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to invite alone. We can ask other people to come alongside us. And a lot of times, like Kendra said, they will. Other people are kind of waiting for us to ask them.
I had a group of women that I was thinking about getting together last summer, and I hesitated. I was nervous. No one's going to want to do this with me. And I reached out just separately to some of the women and tested the waters and said, hey, what do you think about this? Would you be interested in something like this? And the ones that I talked to said they would. And then I invited the whole group, and meeting with them has been so life-giving for me. And then they said, thank you so much for doing this. We are so glad. We enjoy it so much. So as nervous as I was and as hesitant, it was really welcomed by everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Julie tells a story in your book about unintentionally excluding someone who wasn't part of your close circle. And she goes on to explain that she did make it right. But what do you do if you're the person on the outside of the circle kind of looking in?
I think this is hard. I think this is partly goes back to even what we were just talking about our own insecurities. I think sometimes if we haven't been invited in, we feel like maybe people are excluding us intentionally. And as you said, even with Julie's example, it may not even be intentionally, it may be unintentionally. And so for us, I hate to say this again, because I know it's so hard to do, but I think it goes back to this idea of we have to be the first one to initiate or to step out or to invite and kind of get over our own fears. I think, depending on the situation, I'll just give one example. I was a part of a group of women, and I had invited a larger group that was part of the same context that I didn't know very well to an event. And they all said that they would come, including the closer group of women that I'm in real relationship with on a regular basis. And then when the evening came, none of those kind of extended women came, only my close, smaller group showed up. And at first I felt really kind of rejected. And then I realized I have my close people right here. And not that it's not good to never invite new people. We should keep our circles open. I think that's part of this whole idea too. But to recognize who's interested in maybe having an ongoing relationship with you, and maybe there are other groups of people who aren't, and to not take that personally or to be offended by that. I just kind of realized after that night, okay, those women already have their good friends, but I do too over here, and it's okay, and we can still interact in this environment, but they're not looking for another new best friend, and I'm okay with that, and I don't have to take it personally. And so I think sometimes when we're on the outside of certain groups, maybe that's not your people. Maybe there are other places where there are people who would be your closer friends.
Yeah, I agree with that, Kendra. I think when you ask the question, what do you do when you're on the outside of the circle? Maybe you need to make the circle a little bit bigger and look around and see what other overlapping circles you might have. Sometimes people just aren't in a season of life where, like you said, they want a close relationship. So maybe you need to take a look at other places that you go or other interests that you have and try cultivating friendship there. if there are just some circles that are closed to us, you can only do as much as you can do. And so maybe it's okay to widen the circle instead of, fruitlessly trying to work your way into a circle that is closed off.
Thank you, ladies. I love those answers. I asked some women what their biggest struggle was when it came to friendship, and the number one answer, hands down, was time. How do we make time and how do we prioritize those friendships?
Well, I think you kind of said it right there. It has to become a priority. It has to be something that we say is important and we put on my to-do list. I'm a to-do list kind of person.
Me too.
I have to add those things in if they're important because they matter just like anything else that I'm going to check off on my list. And so I think we need to also open up our ideas around how we connect with people and the ways that we do it. Last year was kind of a struggle for a lot of us with everything going on as far as getting together in groups. But you can find so many ways to connect, whether that's face to face or, Kristin, Julie, and I have a running group text. And so pretty much every day we're posting on there, but it just helps us to feel connected with one another. We talk about business stuff, but then someone will throw a funny meme in there. And it just makes you feel like there are other people who are thinking about me. We'll put prayer requests on there. We pray for one another. And I have other friends that I do that with as well. And so I think it's finding ways to be intentional to connect. And certainly there are times like even what we're doing now with Zoom calls, we can do, face-to-face kind of calls or meeting for a cup of coffee. But if we have kids and things like that, we don't always have time for that face-to-face. But even connecting in some of these other ways and just being intentional to take the time to check in with your friends periodically. I've found over the last year, I have prayed for my friends even more. And I have checked in with them to just say, like through text, like, hey, how are you doing today? So I think we have to kind of open our eyes to, or our minds to, how we connect. And maybe one way that worked in the past when I was single and working and could meet with my friend any night of the week after work, with kids and a family, that doesn't always work anymore. And so we have to find new ways to still keep those connections grounded.
I have a friend of mine who also cuts hair. She's a hairstylist, and sometimes every, 6 weeks is as often as I get to see her, but it's an hour or an hour and a half I get to spend with her, and you knock out two things at once.
Exactly. I actually have my friend is a hairdresser too, and that is our same relationship.
Yeah. I think that's a good point too, Kendra, that you really need to be intentional. My husband and I have a family meeting every Sunday afternoon, and we talk about budget and schedule and all of those sort of nitty-gritty household items. But we also include people that we want to see. And so we are just very careful then to target over the next few weeks, who haven't we seen that we really want to, who do we need to be praying for, things like that. So making sure that you are just as intentional with your calendar when it comes to friendships is an important part too.
It's a great one. I know I asked my kids that too. What family haven't we seen in a while that we need to invite over? Who's on your mind?
Yes.
One of the things that I know I struggle with is building bridges to people who are in different life stages than I am, or have just very different circumstances than I do. How do you ladies reach out to women who are in a different stage, in a different place than you?
This is something that Julie has talked about, and so I've kind of stolen it from her a little bit. So even though she's not here with us today, this is kind of her wisdom, not mine. But she talks about the idea of actively befriending somebody who is a step ahead of you and somebody who's a step behind you, because that way you can be, in a mentoring relationship and you can sort of mentor someone else as well. And because she mentioned that approach, I've really tried to look for that in my own life and kind of pinpoint people. Not that they have to be my friends, but, actively seeking out those relationships, because I think our default is that we look for people who are just like us and think the way that we do and have kids our same age. And that is all valuable, but it's also valuable to have friendships with women whose kids are grown and gone, or maybe women who don't have kids, or, different things, different life stages. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like you really do need to be intentional as well and look around you to see who is there.
Mm-hmm. This question actually made me think of my sister-in-law. One of the stories that I had written in the friendship devotional was actually about this idea. She was at her church and was working in the nursery and befriended a woman who was working in the nursery with her, but who was single and who did not have any children. And she at first told me she kind of thought, well, she's not going to want to be my friend. We don't really probably have much in common. But instead, she kind of pushed past that idea and invited her, to coffee. And, several years later, that's one of her closest friends. And she said exactly what Kristin said, which is that she appreciates having someone in a different stage of life who can listen to her prayer requests, but also remind her of what a great stage of life she's in. And the same she can do for her friend and in encouraging her in the benefits of the stage of life that she is in. And so I think it's important, like Kristin said, especially to have people around us with different perspectives, kind of looking in on our lives, because they can offer us encouragement that maybe we wouldn't see ourselves, or the other women around us may not see either if they're in the exact same stage. The other thing I was thinking, Kristin and I and Julie have been a part of women's organizations where there are a variety of ages. And I so appreciate the wisdom of older women speaking into my life, that I think it's really, really valuable, whether it's a church setting or some other kind of nonprofit, to find people, like Kristin said, who are a step ahead of you, because there's such wisdom and value there in those relationships.
I completely agree. Our church group is mostly younger families than we are. My daughters are 10 and 13, and these families have much younger kids, still in diapers, some of them. And they look ahead to us where we can, leave our kids home for a few hours or go on a quick date night. And they're like, oh, you have it made. And I can easily remind them that there are a whole new set of challenges with those years. And, there are things that I miss. I'm not bathing my babies anymore and doing those fun activities. So yes, love your points.
Absolutely.
We've talked about all kinds of different ways that we can seek out women and let them into our circle and widen our circles. But why is it so important for women to walk together? And what does healthy sisterhood look like?
Well, I think it's important because I think we all feel so strongly that that's how God made us, that he designed us to be in relationship with one another. The greatest commandment that Jesus gave was to love God and then to love others. And so that just speaks to this idea that we were meant and made for community. We were meant for relationship with God. We were meant for relationship with other people. So I just think it's so valuable to have those relationships. What was the second part of your question? Sorry.
What does healthy sisterhood look like?
Oh, healthy sisterhood. Yes. Okay. This is really, really important because I think we all get it wrong. I know Kristin, Julie, and I, as we were writing this friendship devotional, we would joke with one another, but it really wasn't a joke, because as we would write these, that we wrote healthy examples, but also harder examples too. And we realized, I don't think I'm always such a good friend. So this book was really written for, I think, us, because we realized, man, there are opportunities that I've missed. There are ways that I've messed up in friendship. And so some of the main things, and I'll let Kristin say some too, but I was just thinking big ones for building healthy relationship are believing the best about one another. I think as women, especially, that's so important that we believe the best about each other, that we be one another's cheerleaders. I want to push back against this cultural idea that women are in competition with one another. I don't think we need to be. I think that we can be some of our greatest cheerleaders and supporters. I think forgiveness, being able to apologize when we have done or said something wrong, and then being on the receiving end, accepting apologies when they're given to us is really, really vital to any relationship, really, but friendship amongst women. So those were just some. Chris, what else do you got?
Yeah, I think you covered most of the highlights, especially assuming the best about others is probably my top one as well. But another idea that comes to mind is recognizing that people have different seasons in their life. And, maybe you're in a season where you're really pouring into others, or maybe you're in a season where they're really pouring into you, and that there's kind of this ebb and flow in friendships and actually relationships in general. And so, just maintaining friendships through that, and not just thinking like, well, my friend hasn't responded lately, and so, she's not my friend anymore. Well, maybe she's just in a tough season and she just needs another gentle nudge from you. So yeah, I think recognizing that there are seasons of life is really important to friendship as well.
And what a great time to reach out and say, what can I pray for you about? Or is there a time that we can just chat? Because maybe you have a lot going on and I want to know that too.
Absolutely.
Well, something I ask all of my guests, and something I always want to know from my friends too, is what are your favorite 5? What are 5 things that you are doing or watching or eating right now that are your favorites?
I can go first. I wrote my 5 down so that I wouldn't forget them. But my first item is I really love the essential oil blends from Eden's Garden. They smell amazing. And one of my favorites right now is called Good Morning. And it's just a mix of like orange and peppermint and I don't know what all, but anyway, I love it. And my kids don't mind it either. So that's always a bonus. My second item is the book Breath by James Nestor. He really talks all about how important our breathing is. And he's a journalist. And so he writes from that perspective, but it's really an engaging read and a quick read, but one that makes you really reconsider how you breathe all day long.
Wow.
It's really interesting. The third thing is, so just last night I watched the new Emma movie. I don't know if you or your listeners like Jane Austen, but I'm totally like a book nerd and I love the book Emma. And so I was curious to watch the movie. It's great. You do see a bear bum for like a second, but that's really the only thing that's questionable. And otherwise it's really charming. And I thought it was cute. Number 4 is there's a local bath and body store called Modern Roots. They actually you can purchase things online as well. But my favorite thing from there right now is they have a candle that's called creme brulee, and it really actually smells like the dessert. And there's no like weird ingredients in there or anything like that. It's good for you, and it smells amazing. And then my last thing is with everything that has transpired in the last several months with pandemic and staying home and all of that good stuff. My family and I have gotten into subscription boxes just as sort of a fun thing to do at home. And our current favorite is Universal Yums, where every month you get a box of snacks and treats from a different country. And we always turn it into a fun Friday night activity. We sit down at the table and we go through all of the snacks. They have information that goes alongside it, so you can learn a little bit about the country itself, and we all rate it. And it's a really fun activity for us.
I love that. Kendra, how about you?
Sure. Okay. So we live in Minnesota. I don't think we said that, where our winters are very long and cold. So my favorite things right now are, Julie introduced Kristin and I to houseplants last fall, which I will not, I shouldn't even say this because she would laugh. When she hears this, she will laugh, because for years, I think Kristin and I kind of teased her about how many houseplants she had, because she has many. And then last fall, we were just like, you know what? We need to make our homes cozy going into the winter. And so we all went and bought houseplants. And Kristin and I both are loving our houseplants. So that's my first thing. My second is a fluffy blanket that I just got from Home Goods that my kids are constantly stealing from me. Because everybody apparently loves it so much. So I should probably go back and get them each one as well. Okay, before Christmas, I was watching Hallmark Christmas movies, but I just like Hallmark movies in general. And so this winter, that is what I have been doing. My kids will sometimes watch them with me, but mostly they tease me that all of those movies are somewhat the same, which is true. They are. But I still like them. So that, and then always and forever, my morning cup of coffee is going to be one of my favorite things. And then I just, for this winter too, got a heater for my front porch. I live in a 100-year-old house. And so our front porch is enclosed, but it gets cold in the winter. And I bought a little heater for it that looks like a small fireplace. So I have been turning that on and sitting out there and doing my work out there, which is just my favorite place in the house now. So that's my list.
It's so sweet and cozy.
Yes, exactly.
And I have a blanket thief in my house too.
Yes.
Doesn't matter how many we have.
Nope.
Ladies, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I love your thoughts and ideas on how we can be better friends, why we want to be, and how we can look for maybe unexpected friendships. I am thrilled that I got to talk with you, and I'm so sorry that we missed Julie today.
Too. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I loved getting to chat with Kendra and Kristin. Fear of rejection is a real thing, but if you push past it and invite anyway, I think you'll see what Kristin said is true. People will be honored that you thought to include them. Another point I really loved was when Kendra encouraged us to recognize that people are in different seasons and that your relationships will ebb and flow. I know I used to be a scorekeeper in my relationships, especially with my husband, mentally recording how many times I'd done something versus how many times he had, or knowing whose turn it was. We can do this in our friendships too, but if we want to be a blessing to our friends, don't keep score and just continue to reach out. If you need more ideas, the Ruth Experience ladies have a free resource, Creative Friendship Goals for the New Year. I snagged my copy and I've included the link so that you can too. If you have a friend who needs to hear this encouragement, please share this show with them this week. And friends, don't let the conversation stop when the show is over. Share your stories and start your own conversations with the girls in your life. I will see you back here in 2 weeks. Thanks so much for tuning in.